Yes, it's time for Uncancelled, in which we tackle the dark underbelly of the news agenda. My next guest is feminist blogger and founder of Standing for Women, which is a global women's rights campaign group. Kellie-Jay Keen made headlines in 2018 with a billboard which bore the definition of a woman, adult, human, female. It was erected in Liverpool to coincide with the Labour Party conference, but was removed after complaints that it would serve to make transgender women feel unsafe. Her supporters, however, have dubbed her a, quote, free speech warrior. Well, Kellie-Jay Keen joins me now. Thank you very much. There she is. Fantastic. Great to have you on the show. Look, it's a fascinating topic, this. Sometimes I think, I can't believe we're even having this discussion. And then other times I think, well, we need to address it. So, first and foremost, why do you feel so passionately about the idea that people need to know the definition of a woman? And it is as singular as that. It's an adult, human, female.
It's quite simple, really. Without the word to describe us, we can't really have any rights, any spaces, or any conversations even about women. So it really is about taking the word and making it really central to everything else that stems from it.
Why does it matter so much? You know, why does it bother you so much if I decide I'm a woman?
Well, because I quite like women-only spaces. I quite like women in hospitals to have single-sex wards. I quite like women in prison not to have to share with, I don't know, a rapist. I quite like the idea that my teenage daughter can go to school and be secure in the fact that her toilets, changing facilities are just for girls. It's a really important thing that we can speak truthfully and coherently about things that matter, such as biological sex.
Do you feel as though there's absolutely no feminism involved in this push, frankly, to describe, I suppose, for me to be able to announce that I am now a woman? It very often does seem to me that it's blokes who are now saying that they're women and trying to redefine womanhood.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not a feminist. I left the feminist movement quite some time ago because it's been totally co-opted by people that want to censor men and men's rights, which will be those men that want to call themselves women. So it's just a deeply misogynist, nasty attack on women's rights. And it's kind of worse than the old-fashioned sexism because you can't even name it. I was reading something written by Jess Phillips today, and she sort of says, I believe that women should have their right to self-organise. I think women-only spaces are really important. I think trans women are women. And then went on to say further things that she felt that women should have. And then you just thought, well, what are you talking about? Because you've just said that men can be women. And then you're saying women-only spaces. So is it women-only spaces meaning actual women? Or is it women-only spaces meaning anyone that calls himself a woman? So if we can just stop this nonsense of diluting what it means to be a woman, then we all know exactly what we're talking about.
OK, well, adult human female is the definition. It's emblazoned behind your left shoulder there. What is female? What is it? Is it a physiological thing for you in your mind?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Of course it is. I've got a dog that's just had puppies, and it wasn't a male dog. It was a female dog, and female dogs are the only dogs that can have puppies. And just like female humans are the only sex that can bear children. That doesn't mean that all do. It just means that no man can.
OK, some people might say that some of the views that you have are potentially anti-trans, or that actually, you know, what right do you have? What right do you possibly have, Kellie-Jay, to say that I'm not a woman?
Well, I have every right as a citizen of the United Kingdom and this bastion of freedom. So I have every right to say it because I am a woman, and it's not a matter of belief. It's the same as if it rains, we get wet. Nobody questions whether or not we're allowed to say that we're wet because it is just a material fact. It's just quite interesting, this sort of attack, this existential attack. I mean, the idea of being anti-trans simply means that I don't want to go along with an ideology that I think makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Anti-trans, people are accused of being anti-trans if they say that women don't have male genitalia, or that women deserve to have not gender-neutral or mixed-sex spaces. So anti-trans is something that, to be quite frank, these days I just brush off and pay no attention to, because it just means that I'm not going along with this ideology.
Well, are you deeply concerned by things like recent incidents involving Kathleen Stock, for example, who was obviously an academic, and she was basically hounded out of a university? She said that women are women. And I mean, for want of a better phrase, when you look at people maybe in the academic community who seem to make these decisions, or people in workplaces, or even people in schools now, the way that we're educating our children, excuse the turn of phrase, but is there a lack of balls when it comes to standing up for women?
There probably is a distinct lack of balls when it comes to standing up for women. It's just really interesting. It's often women that are quite happy to give away our rights, which is why I really can't identify with the feminist movement in 2021 UK. It's just quite peculiar. Like Kathleen Stock, what she represents is not just an academic being handed, but also a real cloak of free speech across our universities. Now, her being handed out simply sends a message to everybody else with her views, including students. So there will be students up and down the country that no longer feel that they can say that they don't think trans women are women.
And it shuts down the discussion, doesn't it? And it cancels people, which is just as well, because we're doing a feature called Uncancelled and you are talking. So this is exactly where we want to be. But another issue that this is, it's almost like the trickle-down theory. So you end up with teachers in schools now all too often. In fact, I say all too often because I don't think they should be doing it at all, right? Trying to talk to 6-year-olds or 8-year-olds about whether or not they may or may not have been born into the wrong body. I mean, at that age, I believed in unicorns and probably spent most of my time picking my nose and running around naked, you know. So that says more about me, I think, than most 6-year-olds, to be fair. But you know, what is this not a concern now for you that actually we have these people who are maybe just trained in teaching children things like geography? They now have a conversation with my hypothetical future child about whether or not they're a boy or whether or not they are a girl, and actually, if I went into the school about that, I'd probably be called transphobic, wouldn't I?
Yeah, of course you would. It's really interesting. Quite a while ago, I had a conversation with a safeguarding officer in a school and asked how they would... I mean, I framed the question as if I was very much wanting boys to be allowed in girls' spaces. And so they answered that if there was a boy that thought he was a girl and wanted to use girls' changing rooms, if the girls objected, they could change elsewhere, which is just bonkers. And I think what this comes from is probably a couple of decades of us not paying attention to what was being taught to those teachers in the universities when they were training to teach. And now those kids, say a decade or 15 years ago that were in the universities, they're now running HR departments. They're in our schools, they're teaching our kids. Many of them don't seem to have actually been in the real world where things like that actually matter. And so it's really, really concerning, especially when it comes to children, because obviously they're very easy to gaslight and manipulate. Half of the children in this country thinks that a man with a beard sails around the world in one night and gives away Christmas presents. So children are quite easy to con.
Yes. Well, of course he does, though, doesn't he? No, I legally have to say that, believe it or not.
He does, yes.
Let's bring my panel in now. I believe my esteemed panel. I think we can get them there very shortly. Political columnist Ali Murad, there they are. Presenter and social commentator Ingrid Tarrant, and former Liberal Democrat MP Lembe Opik. I think we did ladies last time. Let's do ladies first this time. Ingrid, what are your views on this? Have you got anything to put to Kellie-Jay?
Oh, Kellie-Jay, honestly, thank you. I love and appreciate and respect every word that has come out of your mouth. What do you think we can do to just bring sanity back into the whole human race?
I actually think just constantly talking and speaking the truth without hesitation. I think it's really important. You know, if people were racist in front of us, I'm sure we'd all be quite brisk in our responses and try and make sure those people thought that those views weren't approved of. I think we should do the same when somebody says that they have a child of 3 who identifies as the opposite sex. I think that should be a real sort of shocking, oh my goodness, that's preposterous sort of response.
But what about some people who would say, hang on a minute, this could very easily spill over to create an environment that's unsafe for trans people?
Well, that would be men blaming women for male violence, because it's not women with their truthful words that are causing violence against anyone, is it? it's men who can't cope with men who don't want to toe the line and present a certain image. So I don't actually think women's words and speaking the truth causes anybody to be unsafe.
Okay, Lambert, would you want to come in on this?
Yeah, the free speech point. I don't for a moment imagine that you're in any way a bigot about gender orientation, and I very much suspect you probably end up being persecuted because it's uncomfortable to some of the zeitgeist you've described in our education system and beyond. In other words, there's this tyranny of censorship now where what you're saying isn't okay, when ironically the majority of people would probably agree with you but might not want to say so in case they themselves suffer the persecution.
The billboard, just sorry to interject, I'll let you finish now, but I mean, let's be honest, the billboard that you put up was taken down because some people did complain about it, didn't they? But carry on, Lambert, yes?
Well, you see, I think that's tragic because in a libertarian society, and I'm an intense libertarian, you should have the right to say this, even if other people are offended. At least have the debate, which is one reason I think GBNews is right to give you this space. So, very, very sympathetic there. Got one philosophical question for you. It's almost certainly the case that within the next 20 years, we'll be able to transplant ovaries from a female to a male. What happens then? Because theoretically, a man could, or a former man, could conceive of a child. What's your view of that? I'm just interested from a philosophical point of view.
I mean, philosophically, I think that sounds barbaric and revolting to implant female body parts into men. I mean, it's not just a matter of ovaries. So if we just skip the fact that would be biologically pretty impossible, I think to start erasing and dehumanizing women to the point that even the thing which I think is our superpower, which is to create and nurture babies, I just think where on earth will we be going as a human race if we felt that there weren't quite enough children on the earth as it was, and we needed to implant female body parts into men? I think that's philosophically and actually, I think it's quite a revolting idea.
Let's say, medically, I suspect we will be able to do that. You would actually be opposed to that, even in a legal sense, I am guessing.
I absolutely, I would be opposed to that. I think that would be inhumane beyond recognition. I don't know that if in 20 years' time we'll be able to create a biological possibility of men being able to totally change the way their body works. I mean, women bond through their bones with their babies. It's not just a case of different body parts being attached. Our whole bodies are set up to nurture these babies. So I take your point. I think a couple of decades is a little of a stretch.
Maybe.
All right, I'm not sure if we've got time for any more now, I believe, unfortunately. Sorry to you've been muscled out, Ali, I'm afraid. Yet again, I'll have to make sure that I give you all the airtime in the world for the remaining 40 minutes of this show. I'm very sorry. But thank you very, very much for joining us, Kellie-Jay Keen there. And I think it's fascinating stuff. And look, hey, it's a controversial topic. Of course it is. That's why we're not afraid to talk about it right here on GB News. It is a feature called Uncancelled. We can get Ali in. Here we go. Ali, the floor is yours. Who knew it? Carry on.
Well, I was just thinking that the Chinese are spending billions on their Belt and Road Initiative, creating a common destiny for humankind, according to them. The Russians are building a Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline coming into Germany. And here we have the leader of the Labour Party, when asked a direct question about whether a woman has a cervix or not, can't answer a question. How do we get to this point?
I don't know, but don't you think China and Russia are just rubbing their hands with joy at what an absolute state our opposition is in this country? I certainly, if I wanted to totally ruin the West, I think this would be a perfect way to do it, to make us all distracted with these silly, very luxurious, narcissistic enterprises that seem to be right across our culture. And the culture war is mad. But as for the Labour Party, what an absolute sham.